Welcome to Soltron. This is a video review for the custom Gaogaigar that I've made. So this is the DX version that came out like in the 90s. Here he is with the complete Master V and partially complete Menasor. I want to compare these two for a second. So this is what Master V would look like if his stealth backpack was on. But I think these two have a lot in common. Like Master V is pretty much a Gaogaigar homage, I think. Is that they both have stealth backpacks. They both have like trains. He has them in his feet, but Gaogaigar has them in the shoulders. They both have drill robots, so that's in his arms, and then Gaogaigar has them in his legs, obviously. So I think they have a lot in common because like all of his extra robots are the same robots that make Gaogaigar, which is pretty cool. Anyway, this is what his full body looks like, and then this guy's been like a dream for me to do for many, many years, and actually I have a little detour. I want to show you, I actually made a Gaogaigar custom 12 years ago, so this is what today's looks like. This is what that monstrosity I made 12 years ago looks like. Like he was, oh man, I don't know. I mean, I guess everyone has to start from somewhere, but this is what he looked like. I always wanted to fix his like core robot, so I thought I could do that by like changing the head and the arms and making a lion that, or a tiger that looked a little bit more tiger-like. But this is what seemed like a good idea to me 12 years ago. So obviously I've come a long way with my customizing. And here's an image from Google Images of what he originally looked like, so with his original train shoulders and biceps. Here he is now with like his huge train shoulders, and his biceps are like the biggest differences. All right, and then let's get a good look at him. And another difference is I gave him knee joints. You can see those right there. And then I like to put these new drill bits on his knees. And then his toes have articulation now, so they point out a little bit further than the original version. Okay, so a couple reasons why I always wanted to make this custom was I always wanted him to have a head that could actually turn and articulate. And this helmet is kind of just floating, so the articulation is kind of weird for sure. But he can definitely look to the side. He can look kind of up, and then he can definitely get a downward look. And then I'm just basically using the core robot's head as like a neck pretty much. But he can pretty much pull off whatever he needs to do to look side to side. And then another thing I always wanted to fix about the original DX figure was that he never had bicep swivels. So I always wanted to give him like a swiveling bicep. It's kind of pointless because he doesn't really have a lot of poses that need it. But now it's there. He's got bicep swivel, and you can see he's got like a little ball joint in there. You can't really quite see it, and then I also gave him ball joint in the shoulder here, so we get a lot of articulation. And then the whole shoulder itself I'm gonna try to do this without detaching it, and swivel all the way up. So he's still got that original point of articulation. There we go. Now we can get a good look at his elbow. And I'm surprised these Strux joints are actually holding up, so he can actually pull off this pose where he's holding the dividing driver. I'm just going to take this out. Okay, so I fixed a lot of his arm articulation, or I improved it. And then he's also got now, which was kind of an accident, he's also got like wrist swivel or forearm swivel, so that was not really intentional. And then he does have knees. I haven't actually tried these out yet, so we'll see how this works. So it's going to rotate, and then his knee can bend less than 45, or maybe about 45 degrees, less than 90. So he does have knee bend now, so that goes well with like his leg spread. And then we can also get his feet are now ball jointed. So we can also pivot those into place so you can have a more stable footprint. Oh, his thigh swivel is kind of an issue because this is not as tight as it needs to be, but let me see if I can get him in a good pose. Okay, that took a bit of work. It's mostly that all of his joints are pretty good. It's just actually his thigh swivels are the thing that's really fighting me. That's the only part, that's where his point of failure is, but otherwise he can pull off some poses, no problem. He can almost get like a heaven and hell pose. I've never seen the show, so I don't know. I'm sure there's a way to do it that's less awkward than that. But then he can also like pose his fists so the palms are up. But yeah, he's got some options. Okay, and then the last thing I want to point out before I move on to the other modes is that I actually made it so his hip skirts spread out, because in the original version they would actually hinge like this. They would hinge forward, and that's how you'd get him to spread his legs. So in this one, his hips can actually just spread in a way that's natural to allow him to get his A stance. So transforming him is basically the same as the original figure. You're just going to lift up the helmet and then lower these main sections, and then you can just rip off this whole stealth backpack, and then you just basically just fold the helmet down and then just rotate these sections up. Oh, actually, I did forget one other thing. Another cool feature that the original figure had was that when you put the Gao liner on, he could actually transform these arms because they slide into this. So he can actually do that because these will just slide down. Okay, that wasn't supposed to happen, of course. Let me try that again on the other side. We'll see if we'll have any better luck. But so this will just, these forearm sections will slide onto these basically sliding joints, and then the liner bicep will basically just retract. There we go. So this is like the new assembly that allows him to have a wrist swivel. And there we go. So he can actually transform kind of in a natural looking way, where this just plugs into the arm, and then you just kind of like shove it down into the forearm, and then you just raise it off that slider, and that can actually transform the same way as the original toy, which was a really good design. Right, and there's the stealth with the turbines or the forearms attached. So if you've never seen this figure, it looks like this. And then I am going to get like some Lego plates, like some of these, to just cover up this ugliness in the back. So that'll be on the way in the mail eventually. Okay, so now we have this going on, and this guy does have parts forming. I couldn't find a good way to avoid it, so you do have to rip off one whole section of the train, and then while this is off, you can see I made these covers so this can open up, and then you rotate the bicep, and you just sandwich that in and close this up. And the trains don't have any wheels. It's not a big loss to me, but there you go. There's a transformed train section, which looks pretty sleek. And then this is the whole assembly on the inside to hold everything together and make it nice and tight. And then there is a ball joint that pegs this all together, so you do have to kind of lift up this joint to get this out. And then you have like this T-shaped section that looks like this, and then you do the same thing on this arm. Now we have the two train sections. We can just peg those together. And then the parts forming is because now we have this kind of useless T-joint. There you go. There's the liner Gao. And then this just transforms the same as normal. You're just going to yank out these sections. And I want to be gentle with this. Oh, and then this fell off because I haven't glued this ball joint into place yet. Okay, so we have the two drill legs. And then all I did was I just used some blue tack, and I put these drills over the original ones. I do really appreciate the gold, of course, but I think these drills look cooler, and they go with his new biceps a little bit better and make him a little beefier. And then you just close that up as normal. And then I am going to make a cover that covers this as well, so you'd have to rotate the toe around. And then that's just going to do that. And you do the same thing with the other side. And now we have our two drill vehicles looking pretty good. Or one drill vehicle, I guess. And then finally, to deal with, what is this thing called? I don't know. Like I said, I didn't watch the show, so I don't know what the regular generic Gaogaigar core figure. That's not Gao Lion. I don't know what he's called. But anyway, and then I also have a little ball joint on his neck here to give him some posability, of course. And then you're going to just rotate his whole hip section. And then he does have to have, because he's so tall now with these extra knees, he does have to have like this bent a little bit just to compensate for his new height. And actually, I did make it, so he has to do one other thing. Because eventually I am going to install knee covers to cover all this mechanical detail, even though I think it looks kind of cool. And then we basically have that mode. And then another nice thing that I added was that this hip section now has its armature. You can close up these hip skirts. And those will fold up pretty nicely on the back here. And then you can spread them out a little bit if you want it to be flush. So it can either be flush like this and just wing out a little bit, or you can get the wings all the way put in, and then it just has to like stick out from the back, like kind of like a booster or something. And then basically that's his new robot mode. And I think this guy's articulated head does a lot to make him look less derpy than the original figure. He just looks a lot cooler. And then I do want to take a minute and talk about these knees I had to manufacture. So you can see they're made of a lot of parts. There's like a washer up here. They are very tight. I can actually even tighten this a little bit more, but it's already plenty tight enough to hold Gaogaigar up. So that takes a lot because he weighs at least a pound. He's pretty heavy. And then these were kind of based on these terrible Lego knees that I used first, and these just completely failed. They're too wimpy. So I had to make my own set. So I'll show you all the pieces that went into that. Okay, so here's all the bits that required me to make these new knees. And these new knees are really good, and I'm having issues. Like, I've had two figures on camera with their knees explode, so I definitely needed to find a way to make some good knees. And this has been the best solution I've found, because these are okay for smaller figures, but they don't do it for anything that's leader class. Like anything that's even this big, which is not even a modern day leader class anymore. So first it starts with a bolt or a machine screw, and then I put a washer in, and then these special pieces here are battery terminals, and then a spacer here. So this is just nylon, but I think rubber spacers would also be useful. So here's a bigger version for that Zoids T-Rex Megatron I made a long time ago, whose knees exploded on camera. And then you put the nylon spacer, and then the other battery terminal, and then another washer, and then the most important part is this lock nut. So once this lock nut is on, it's not going to come off. It's not going to loosen up. So once you tighten it, it will stay at that tightness pretty much permanently. You can kind of loosen it up, but I think that will damage the nylon that keeps this all together. So basically that's the knee joint, and it's nice and tight depending on how tight you tighten the lock nut. You can definitely over tighten it. And then it's got this mushroom shape on the top, which is very nice. So that means once you insert it, you can have a rotation joint, because this is basically a mushroom peg. And yeah, it's not going to really come out. And if you're worried about it coming out, you can always put a screw in here that will just make sure that this binds the plastic to the metal terminal. So this has been like a really good knee joint. I'm very happy with how this turned out. Could even make good elbow joints if you don't over tighten it. So really pleased with this design. Probably costs like $2 in materials for each one of these joints, which I think is worth it for some of these bigger figures. And then what else was I going to say? Oh yeah, these joints aren't perfect though. They do have one flaw, and that's that there's a tiny little bit of metal connecting this ring to this part. So actually they do have a little bit of give, like side to side like that. And if you keep wiggling it back and forth, this metal will fatigue and eventually break. So that's a problem. And that's why I put the nylon spacer at the top of the knee here to just keep this from wiggling back and forth. But I mean, you're not really going to grab an action figure and turn its knees sideways anyway. That would probably destroy most of your figures in the first place. But anyway, back to the review. So as you can see, this guy's looking pretty epic. I think a huge improvement from his original version, even though I only changed a couple things, just the ball joint neck, and then this skirt doesn't have to be visible in this mode, so it kind of transforms better. Because otherwise, oops, you can see that's just on a ball joint, of course. That's how I do most of my customizing. Otherwise, his skirt's always there, and I think this helps separate him a little bit. And the other thing you could do is you could even turn this like all the way upside down and just have it flush against his back, which helps hide it even more. But anyway, I think he looks really good. And here's just a group shot of all the components together. And then actually, part of the reason I did this custom was because I actually bought a Gaogaigar that did not come with the shoulders in the first place, so I had to make it anyway. And then this, of course, is the same size as Shin Kalion, so he's kind of like in that universe now, which I think is really cool. Okay, and then let's go on to the last thing. So normally Gao Lion looks like this when you transform him, or maybe usually bend his legs forward like this, so his legs are flush, or his feet are flush. So this is kind of a terrible look, and this is already an improvement to the original because his head is not just down here. It's usually his head is just crammed all the way down. So I gave some ball joints into this section so his head can elevate a little bit, and made this kind of like yellow mane kind of thing to hide some of those pieces. So he has more of a natural looking lion head. And then this whole section can move backwards on this armature. And then finally, with these knee joints, we can rotate the legs like this, and you get something that looks much, and then let's just put his tail down, it doesn't need to be sticking up. You get something that looks like a much better looking lion mode, I think. I think this is a huge improvement. So before, after, and then here's how he looks from the front, not bad. And then now that he has ball joints here, he can actually turn his head a little bit. So that helps with that articulation as well. So that's my improved Gaogaigar set. Oh, actually, there is one other thing. So it's always bothered me how the Gao liner doesn't really do anything. It's just a train. That's not very impressive. So I actually have all these leftover bits, and this piece can just basically peg here now. So, and then this whole carriage section. So what I want to do is make it so that the train can actually combine with this carriage and become like the thing that holds his weapon, and then this T piece will just be somewhere in the mix. Basically like this, and then this section will just kind of hide the front of the weapon here. So you can get a train that looks like this, which I think would be pretty cool and make the train seem like it's more integrated. So that's something that I'm going to do on a future update, so that the liner actually does something interesting, which has become like the whole weapon carrier, even though it's still going to be parts for me because these parts aren't used in the robot at all. But anyway, I'll see you in the next one.